Hari Om friends, welcome to the sixth part of the Battle of Raichur. It's been a long time, and I do apologize if I look very tired or seemed a little bit bugged out. It's the end of the day, and I haven't been exactly in perfect health for the last couple of months. So let's get started. And again, I'm using the open source tools, so just bear with me. It's not as smooth and fast as using Microsoft Word. Okay, there we go. So I just want to focus on what was the strength of the Vijayanagara armed forces. So just to give you a little bit of perspective, and I want to kind of expound on an important concept here, which is the number of troops in peacetime a country has and the number of troops in wartime. Okay, so this chart shows the strength of the US armed forces, so Navy, Army, Air Force, and Marines. Around 1939, just before Second World War broke out, and around the end of the war, so the number of people in the armed services, including combatants and non-combatants, typically administration, logistics support, etc., which are roughly 40% of the strength of the army, reached around 12.5 million. So you can see it kind of shot from roughly 334,000 or 3,34,000 right up to 12.5 million, because in wartime the demands are very different, so the strength obviously kind of goes 5 or 6 times more. So just remember this concept, and let's look at the basic structure of the Vijayanagara army, how it was divided. So the Vijayanagara army was what can be called a Shadanga Sena. So Shadanga means 6 limbs. Okay, so typically in Indian military warfare theory, the army was divided into 4 parts, Chaturanga Sena. But the Vijayanagara army followed, I think, the precepts of a text called Shukraniti, which is, I think, a medieval text on warfare. And the army was divided typically into 6 parts. So first you had the infantry, the main fighting arm. Then you had the cavalry, okay, which would include your heavy cavalry, heavily armored, and I will be describing with the photographs and historic paintings in the next part of the series. You had elephants, which was the Gajasena. You had the artillery, so very important component was artillery. You had camels and you had bulls. So camels and bulls typically form the logistical part, and I think camels were also used to carry a small cannon known as Shaturnal. So it was a camel-mounted cannon, very small, and it could be turned around, swiveled, and I think it was capable of firing one shot or maybe few shots. So this was the Shadanga Sena, so divided into 6 parts. So let's look at some of these components. So I don't have data for all. So all of this data, so I've got my handwritten notes over here. And all of this data has been taken from 2 books, and these are classics because these were written in the 1930s and 40s. So one is Social and Political Life in Vijayanagara Empire by Bhaskar Anand Saletore. This was published in 1934, the first edition. And the second book is Administration and Social Life under Vijayanagara by T.V. Mahalingam. So both very big scholars of Vijayanagara history. And these books are freely available on Internet Archive, so I'll put the links in the description box. Please do download and read these books. I read them many years back, and I've just revisited them, to prepare for this series, because there isn't a lot of research on, the army, the armed forces, the battle tactics of Vijayanagara. So these 2 books are quite good because they got entire chapters devoted to how the armed forces were structured, what was their strength, etc. Okay, so let's look at the infantry. Now I have only put this in the graphical format just so it's easy to visualize. This shouldn't be taken as some kind of statistical proof or anything like that. This is simply a graphical visualization, not a comparative kind of bar chart either. It just makes it easier to visualize compared to having a boring table with dates and blah blah blah. So this is much more easier to understand. So again, this is not comprehensive, so I have mined these numbers from these 2 books. And This shows you the strength of Vijayanagara infantry from 1366 to 1564. Now, perceptive people will question why I'm stopping at 1564. Because in 1565, as quite a few of you will be aware, there was a titanic battle between the five Deccan Sultanates and Vijayanagara Empire, which is known as the Battle of Talikota. And the numbers for the Battle of Talikota for the Vijayanagara forces are from a manuscript called Ram Rai's Bakhair. So I've got the English translation of it, and even Salitori and Mahalingam both give the numbers, and the numbers are absolutely exponential. So were they exaggerated? Did they reflect the need of the time? So it was a world war pretty much, if you think the combined armies of the five sultanates fighting against a single empire. So obviously but the numbers are so great that they will skew up the chart completely, which is why I kind of stopped at 1564. So Talikota I will take up in a different series. So I'll make a series on the Battle of Talikota itself. So that will be a good research point for me. Okay, so let's start off with this. So in 1366, so when Bukkaraya was ruling Vijayanagara, now Ferishta, the Muslim chronicler who was in the court of the Ahmednagar Nizam Shahs much later on, he says that Bukkaraya had 30,000 cavalry, 3,000 elephants, 100,000 infantry or 1 lakh infantry. And this Farishta is talking about the Battle of Adoni in 1366. Now there might be a typo here because Salitore says 1 million infantry. Now, and I haven't read the original translation by Briggs, so probably at some point I need to correct this, or if you know the exact number, please put it in the comments. So I'm inclined to go with the 1 million figure because Bukkaraya was fighting the Bahmani Empire, and this was fully militarized and they could easily mobilize 100,000 cavalry at will. And apparently, obviously we don't know how true it is, so in the 1366 Adoni campaign, so Bukkaraya suffered a serious reverses, and even after this, so Salitore says this, that the Bukkaraya Vijayanagara armies were still around 5 lakhs or 500,000 infantry and 40,000 cavalry. So there is some kind of discrepancy in the numbers. Okay, this is just an illustrative, but this is what is known as a wartime scenario. So just remember the example of US. And in peacetime, the numbers would have been quite less. So the 1421 number comes from a Venetian traveler, or Italian traveler called Niccolo de Conti. Okay, and he estimated the Vijayanagara army at around 90,000, and this is attested by Salitore as well. So I put the numbers from both Salitore and Mahalingam. So the first number I'm quoting typically will be from Mahalingam's book, and the second number, or if it's the same, will be from Salitore's book. Now in 1422-23 there was another Persian visitor called Abdur Razak. So he was an ambassador from the Emperor of Persia, and he says that infantry was around 11 lakhs. Okay, so around a million, little more than a million, and elephants more than 1,000, and he describes them as lofty as hills and gigantic as demons. Okay, so these were war elephants, So, and like I said, in the next part, I will start showing you what they typically look like. So some pictures from my personal collection, some from paintings available on the internet, etc. Okay, and this was in the rule of Devaraya Dvitiya, Devaraya II, who was the emperor of Vijayanagara in that time period. So Salitori gives the same figures as Mahalingam. In 1443, Farishta says that the Vijayanagara army had 62,000 archers, so around 2,000 Muslims and 60,000 Hindus, 80,000 cavalry, and around 2 lakhs or 200,000 infantry. Okay. So moving on to 1468-74, a Russian traveler, Athanasius Nikitin, so difficult to pronounce, he stayed in Karluburgi, which is Gulbarga, between 1468 and 1474, and he estimated the Vijayanagara army at around 300 elephants, around 100,000 or 1 lakh infantry, and 50,000 horse. So this must have been a peacetime, and this was probably the strength of the emperor's personal armies, because the emperors got a lot of, you could say, military levies or military units from the different nayakas or different governors of different areas of the Vijayanagara Empire. That basically kind of made the army strength 5 or 6 times in wartime. And Nikitin estimates the Bahmani strength around 575 elephants, 9 lakh infantry, and around 1,90,000 cavalry or 190,000 cavalry. And that is not surprising because the Bahmani Empire was a predatory empire. It produced nothing good or original of its own, and its existence was slow solely by raiding and looting, the Hindu kingdoms around. So in 1502, I don't have the stats for the infantry for 1502, so we'll leave that. And we have got the stats for cavalry for 1502, so I'll cover that in the next slide. So in 1514, there was another visitor, I think a Portuguese, called Duarte Barbosa. He says around 20,000 cavalry, 1 lakh infantry, and 900 elephants. And Salutare has the same figures. So this 100,000 seems to be the average standing army during peacetime. And when you see these big jumps, okay, so 1.1 million, 100, so these seem to indicate, when there was a war going on, when every resource was mobilized. And there's another famous visitor, Pace. He says about Krishnadevaraya. So Krishnadevaraya had 1 million fighting men. So this was somewhere around the 1529 mark. So Krishnadevaraya had 1 million fighting men. Excuse me. Including 35,000 cavalry. So I'll touch this in the next slide. And Krishnadevaraya has the capability. So on one campaign, he sent 50 commanders with 1,50,000 soldiers, including cavalry. And when he was fighting the 3 sultanates, so the Adil Shahs, the Qutub Shahs of Golconda, Adil Shahs of Bijapur, and the Nizam Shahs of Ahmednagar, he could easily field an army of around 2 million. He's described by Pace as the most feared king in India. Another visitor around the same time in Krishnadevaraya's rule, so 1514 to 1521 timeline, he says that the Raichur army had around 7,03,000 infantry, so almost 700, little more than 700,000 infantry. So this was the infantry which was fielded during the Raichur war. And cavalry and elephants. And in 1515, there was a battle where Kondavidu was attacked by, I think, Qutub Shah. So at that point, Krishnadevaraya sent a general with around 100,000 or 1 lakh infantry and 8,000 cavalry. And again, Nunes makes an important point that Krishnadevaraya had a permanent force of 50,000 infantry who were regularly paid by the state. And this included 6,000 cavalry who were also the palace guard. And these also had 20,000 spearmen, so separate from the 50,000 infantry, and shield bearers, and around 3,000 elephant caretakers. So quite a big peacetime fielding as well. But you can see this was the core of the Vijayanagara army for peacetime. And Rayavachakamu, okay, so I have spelt it wrong. So Rayavachakamu, I think that's the right Telugu pronunciation. Please correct me in the comments. So Krishnadevaraya on anti-Muslim campaigns had 120 ghatams. So ghatam is a term for a grouping of 10 elephants. So 120 ghatams means around 1,200 elephants and 5 lakhs of infantry and 60,000 cavalry. So under Krishnadevaraya's rule, because he was very aggressively outward, so the standing strength of the army obviously naturally went up 5 or even 7 times, because you had to be on a war footing all the time. So there's another Telugu text called Krishnadevaraya Vijayamo, which says Krishnadevaraya's army had 6 lakhs infantry. So these figures they are quite close. And around 2,000 elephants. So in the period of pre-1564, so Farishta says Ramaraya had around 90,000 infantry. This seems to be the kind of the peacetime grouping. And a couple of I think Spanish or Portuguese visitors, Couto and Faria Souza, they estimate infantry above 600,000 or 6 lakhs. And again, Salitori gives this figure that to attack Raichur there were 7,33,000, so very close to this one, infantry, including 586 elephants. So again, these large figures, like I mentioned before, these indicate elevated troop levels in wartime. And I believe the peacetime strength of the army was typically around 90,000 to 100,000. But again, this is speculation. So let's go on to the next slide. So we've got the cavalry. So again, I have mentioned, who said what. But the typical strength of the cavalry, again in peacetime, probably hovered between, 20 to 30,000. And in these scenarios, obviously it literally shot up whenever there was war. So 1514, 1529, again the Raichur war. 1443, what was in 1443? I'm not sure why there's this big pulse. Okay, let me have a look at the notes. So I need to check if there was any kind of war in 1443. But so these were again the cavalry numbers. Again, we don't know how accurate they are, but it's useful to get an idea. And the Gajasena, the elephant army. Again, for the elephant army, the 1366 number 3000, because this indicates there was a very big war. So this was probably what, 30 ghatams. So one ghatam is 10 elephants, so around 30 ghatams. Whereas Krishnadevaraya, and in Devaraya's time and Krishnaraya's time, I think it peaked at around 1200 war elephants. So you can see in peacetime the strength kind of seems to go down, and which is quite natural because the standing core of the army wouldn't have that many elephants. So when a lot of these governors or nayakas, as they were known, of different regions, they brought in their own forces, then the strength of the army would basically have, or the elephant corps would have basically doubled or tripled. Okay, so you can see these numbers. So in peacetime 251, again it pulses to 551, and this was probably the time of the Raichur war. So in some cases there aren't any dates, but there are time frames, so we can't exactly pinpoint, which is why in the dates you will see, I put in 1519, 1521, 1529, 42, because the visitors, these are all made up of accounts of foreign visitors, and they visited this at some time, but we only have got a general time frame when they visited. So again, like I said, don't take these as some kind of hard statistics. So these are just numbers which I have mind, and I think this presentation format was easier to present. Okay, so that's that, and I hope this wasn't too boring. Apologies for my voice, very scratchy and itchy. So the two books are Administration and Social Life under Vijayanagar by Professor T.V. Mahalingam, 1942, long time back. Social and Political Life in the Vijayanagara Empire by Bhaskar Anand Salitore or B.A. Salitore, 1934, and Evil Odor book. But the research was absolutely superb. So two very big scholars, and like I said, I'm really enjoying reading their books. So in the next part, I will explain a bit on the recruitment and structure of the Vijayanagara army. So how did the recruitment work? What were the different ranks of the Vijayanagara army? So friends, if you have enjoyed this video, do remember to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.